Dr. David Criag is here. A couple of pictures, research, so we're students. So I think we're going to have a good time. Dr. Craig.
Hey, thanks, Ray. Hello, Kipper. So this is a great tradition that Willamette University has had the privilege to be in community and sort of get to know Salem Audubon and the chapter here. And students have come frequently in the I don't know how it's more than a decade, and oftentimes this is the first time people get to talk to an audience outside of their peers. So they're talking to folks in the real community. The longer I've done my job, the more inspired I get by the students at Willamette, and the more important that we make these bridges between generations, between places and time. And so I have 10 students who are going to go and share a little bit about a large collaborative project that is about the Willamette Valley. It's about an idea of placekeeping and really getting to know this particular place, but doing it in a global way. So, and then did anybody go to the Willamette Valley Bird Symposium? A few of you did. So we're going to see a lot of the similar slides. I'm going to give that talk. I was talking about broadly about nuthatches and this particular place. And you're going to see the special edition, which has all the contributions of students and where we're headed in the future. And then for those who didn't get to go, this is really important. So this is offered by Emily Poole, and it's one of 4 pictures that they have done. And the key thing is the nuthatch. So we're going to have nuthatch be the star of the show. You've heard me and other students talk about this. This year, we're really moving into an order of magnitude more serious about the science of nuthatches, and that's why I have so many collaborators. What I like about this particular piece by Emily Poole is that it's catches the complexity of the oak tree. The oak tree is its habitat. So we have 4 different seasons. Winter, which we're in right now, that's the one that Emily calls collecting. We've got spring coming. We've got summer, and we've got fall. And it's the idea of a neighborhood, placekeeping people, oaks, and our Willamette Valley together. So that's the idea. And placekeeping is a specific, the wrong thing wrong with Emily's pictures, they didn't put a kestrel in there. So we added the kestrel. And then this talk is going to be from the perspective of a nuthatch. And so there's going to be some expectations that you think about things you know, but in a less familiar way. And some of those things will be historical reasons to think about things differently, and then also just sort of the way we approach things. And then just to have some more fun, nuthatches are the birds that hang upside down. That's sort of the funny perspective there. Brown creepers head up, woodpeckers sapsuckers go around, and then they can all kind of collide there. I love Rosemary Moscow's cartoons. We need a Western edition of this. So I've got some artists in my class. We still need to work on that. This time, why nuthatches, why slender-billed white-breasted nuthatches, why this bird is so important is the Oregon Park of Fish and Wildlife, and others have said that this is an important bird. And there is this idea of oaks and people and prairie. This is a major conservation document that's come out, a market plan for the next 10 years, complementing a thing called Decade of the Oak. And it's like a 60-page portfolio that a whole bunch of people are contributing to. I joined very, very, very late in the process. And I'm like, man, I sure would be cool to have an image on the cover. And so they put it on the cover and they put it on the back. That's so cool. And they put the wrong nuthatch on the cover, and we're going to talk about that. So this is one of the reasons that how and why that happened. This is the right nuthatch, and this is the Gaiety Hill neighborhood in Salem, Oregon. This is the alley in my neighborhood, and that big, huge oak tree is one of the most important teachers I had in my time in Salem. And we're going to talk about a lot of complicated things, but in one way, it's just like how important is one big old oak tree to a nuthatch? How important is one tree to a neighborhood? How important are we to each other, both nuthatch and people? This is not on the test. Nobody has a test, but this is a really new and an old idea that I want to emphasize. The idea. I'm going to read this slowly. This comes from my friend David Harrelson. It's the idea of placekeeping, and there's a difference between placekeeping and placemaking. This is the idea that knowing history is vital for effective, ethical placekeeping because it grounds stewardship in the specific cultural, ecological, and ancestral context of land being more than placemaking. To honor, protect, and maintain living indigenous and historical connections, this practice requires understanding the past to prevent future harms, ensuring respectful stewardship, honoring and enduring reciprocal and sacred relationships between communities and their environment. So this is kind of a vocabulary that we're going to play around with, placekeeping. For me, again, this is a big talk. We have a whole bunch of different kind of chapters we're going to zoom through, and then I'll invite students in to talk for a few slides in places that they are providing leadership. And then another thing, raise your hand if you've heard of land acknowledgement before. Well, that's sort of a modern thing. Some of the work that I've been privileged to do with the Grand Ronde community and the Siletz community, the descendants of the Kalapuya people, that's a thing that I'm not doing land acknowledgements anymore. We're working on land action. What can we do? What can we plant an oak tree? Can we count birds? Can we share stories? Can we learn the language? So I've been studying Chinook Wawa, so I'm not very good at it, so I'm going to read it out loud. You can go with me. San, Ohayam David Criag, Naka Yapo, Naka Miklite, Kappa, Chinikity, P, Naka Wawa, Kalakala, Pikanawe Stick, Naka Mon Kumtux, Kappa Willamette School, Ayu Masi, Ayu Kumtux, Naka Wawa. It just said, good day. Hello, my name is David Criag. I live in Salem. I talk about birds and acorn trees. I'm a teacher in Willamette. Thank you for listening to my talk. Another thing that I'm a descendant of people from Ireland. That's part of my history. Dia is einem dom dahi. Hello, my name. Hello, David is the name to me. So this is a way in which I want all of you folks who have ancestors, think about your ancestors, where they came from. Do you know their languages? Do you know the placekeeping traditions of those? How does it relate to where we are today? And then I want to acknowledge Cheryl Kennedy, David Harrelson, David June Lewis, and Hattie Mercier, all friends of Willamette and people who contributed to either my learning the language a little bit, learning how to make meaning of this place, and then having the privilege to be in their company. Okay, this is that same beautiful oak tree in my alley, and this is one reason that we love the Willamette Valley. Just beautiful, beautiful big trees. And this is the idea of. I gave this talk initially. I didn't know I was going to become an oak person or a nuthatch person. I am a person who tells stories, and at this point, 7-8 years ago, I was talking about crows and terns, and my friends Ed Elverson and Tom Kay and then asked me to come and give a keynote address at the Cascade Prairie Oak Conference and talk about what I wanted to. And it was the year of the bird. And so I wanted to talk about birds and growing up and how I came to appreciate birds. By great chance, my parents are here today. Dave, could you stand up? This is David Michael Criag, my dad. And then, Mom, could you stand up? This is Narlene Criag, Narlene with an N. And this is the backyard in Salem, but we're going to get to the backyard where I grew up at Dad and Mom's house. So again, this just isn't this just like you see this and you know it's important. It's beautiful. And this is, in fact, was the first heritage tree in the city of Salem. The first heritage tree in the state of Oregon was made by Elizabeth Lord in downtown Salem here. And again, there are great trees. This is one of my favorite oak trees in Bush Pasture Park. And one of the things I love about oak trees are these long, long branches. Everybody put your arms out like an oak tree. And again, some of you are touching fingertips like, oh, get away. So that's exactly these extraordinary trees. We believe this branch structure and these trees are the thing that are most important to the white-breasted nuthatch locally. Those trees only grow in places that the ancestors of Cheryl Kennedy, David June Lewis, Hattie Mercier, David Wilson, where the indigenous people had fire and had enough landscape open enough for the trees to reach out and have those branches. So we really love those trees. And we'll throw in the birds there on those branches. Okay, here's one on our campus. Willamette University is an old university. We have a lot of these big old trees. Not quite as beautiful as Bush Pasture Park, but again, important tree. And then here's my alley tree in Wesley Street. You can see the little broken branch in the middle. Here's the first sad thing I want to share. The tree, my neighbor was alarmed, and in a short period of acute stress, they decided the whole tree had to get cut down. because it was maybe dangerous and was going to fall down and hurt people. It turned out not to be that bad. The tree was over 400 years old, and it's gone. And we know it's 400 years old because when Elwood cut it down, we counted the tree rings. And again, that's going to take a long time to come back. A new tree was planted, a new oak tree. So that's a little bit hopeful. For 2018, it was the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, celebrated for 100 years. Amazing piece of American thought and conservation. And so that's how I got into this. And then you were back in David Peter Craig's, that's my name, in the backyard in Scappoose, and thinking about birds. And for me, we had a big oak tree in the backyard. And one of my earliest memories of birds was an oriole. I didn't know it was called an oriole, but it was something like this orange bird in a sock nest. Today, with the internet, you could go and I could say, could I find a picture of an oriole in Scappoose, Oregon, or Savi's Island? And yes, the answer was here it is. Here is a picture of Savi's Island. I just went bird watching with Harry Fuller and Barbara and a bunch of folks, the Willamette students. And then my home, I grew up in Scappoose right over there. And this arrow, I couldn't find a picture of the oriole in Scappoose, but I found it on Savi's Island, again, in oak trees. And why I'm making that line is, here's my backyard that I grew up in. This is the natal habitat of David Criag, my home area. And look there, you see that big row, those are oak trees. And these are oak trees, again, of my childhood. And again, part of why we're here tonight is I got lucky in having that backyard. Here I am, there's me, there's Dad, Gerald, Darren, and Davina. And then I put a circle around that circle because the oak tree of my childhood is gone. It also was lost at some point, but there's a brick ring around that sort of marks that spot. It's kind of a memorial to that tree. And then if we look at this particular, one of the students we'll talk about in a minute here, Rose Grimson, we are working on taking existing data of oak trees that are mapped in the Willamette Valley in the state and trying to make meaning of those. This is a map from a thing that Portland Metro's done, and all those blue dots and those yellow dots are oak trees that have been mapped already. And so you can see that row of oaks that I grew up with. That's data. What we're headed towards is, how do we make meaning of all this contemporary data, Google Earth data, the sets that are out there, and then relate it to all kinds of different ways of knowing. These, again, are places that white-breasted nuthatches have been seen using eBird. And then, so that's that. If we go to Scappoose, when I was there was Grant Watts, the grade school I went to in the Scappoose High School. You can see eBird, all kinds of match observations there. There's the good luck of a high school teacher who has a bird club, and so people are counting nuthatches. Okay, and then this about years ago, on either Stuart or Western Middle Alps or something else that needed conservation locally. Maybe American Kestrel. I was thinking about that as a new study system for the next decade. And he really likes brown creepers. And I thought, cute, but they're kind of dumb. I wasn't excited by brown creepers. One of the elders requested about brown creepers, but she was so excited. I started to look more closely. Reading the literature, then we found out that brown creepers are interesting subspecies wise. She did her master's on that. And then the nuthatch, that's when I learned that the genetics of our local nuthatch suggests they should be a full species and that they're very, very different. David Criag talked a little bit about because they're so different. How does that fit into why we're talking about them tonight? David is a rising senior.
Good afternoon. Okay, so the slender-billed white-breasted nuthatches is a subspecies, and currently it's considered specific to the Willamette Valley ecoregion, meaning that we think that it's a sedentary bird, and it stays where it's born and raised in its home range. So studies are showing that it is dependent on oaks, so it can be a very good indicator species for our Oregon oaks, and a good indicator of our ecosystem health and forest health. The here is the Oregon conservation strategy, and it contains it focuses on a lot of diverse variety of species, from like birds, butterflies, bats, insects, mammals, and yeah. So this and including the white-breasted nuthatch.
Thanks. We'll update back a little bit. The other thing about that particular set of species, of all of the Willamette conservation strategy, a whole bunch of different habitats. Oaks, the number one bird is the white-breasted nuthatch. This is a picture. We're going to have a little history. This is one of, again, interesting part, but some parts are going to be sad. This is Kalapuya man drawing. This is the first image we have that is durable of the Kalapuya people, made in 1841 by Alfred T. Agate. And it's the only surviving sort of early full body picture. This is the picture you'll see many places. And I want you to think of this person in this place as a cosmopolitan contemporary trader connected to many cultures. If you know, one of the things that I've learned is his clothing includes trade products from the coast, from things as maybe as far away as the Great Lakes. And this was a person who was part of a dynamic ecosystem, and including making fire and food and living and things that we can think of as the cities and farms, a bush pasture park. Part of the extraordinary things we're learning from oak trees, and a huge ice storm in 2021 in February, a whole bunch of oak trees came down, and we made dendrochronological or like tree ring science, and we can see that the trees of Salem, a lot of the big old trees, are pre-European settlement. So they are trees of Kalapuya man's family and his ancestors going back into the 1700s. So a lot of these big old trees. And the birds that are dependent on them are dependent on the history of that particular ecosystem. This particular person here, this was Kanabi. He was one of the Kalapuya people who witnesses a whole bunch of changes in this ecosystem, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit. This period here, a lot of the oak trees, big oak trees we have, show the signature of fire stopping with the Kalapuya management and changing populations of Kalapuya people to what we have today. Kunabi, what we know about his life is that he witnessed the first major pandemics here. He saw the epidemics of a variety of flus, malaria, and other diseases, and that the 10,000 people that he in was reduced to a couple hundred. The landscape that Quinabi saw, and again, we'll connect to some Europeans here in a second, the Kalapuya man had, these are again the first signs of these open landscapes of oak trees and prairies, lots of different animals. And this is bush pasture park in a way that would have been that time. It would have had grizzly bears here. We would have had wolves. Condors were here. White-breasted nuthatch was here. And it's still here. Wolf was here. Quinabi was here. And then Townsend's warbler was here. Camas was here. People were here collecting camas and acorns. And so we'll talk more about this. A lot of the sets we're going to talk about is based on the General Land Ordinance Survey, as European folks took over the land. They didn't ask permission, they just took it. And then they started to make maps and describe where things were. And they described the habitats of the place at that time. And so they made these maps that we can go and eventually backcast to know what the Willamette Valley was like in 1850. And that then helps us know about some of the bird activity in the past. Here's a map that you may have seen, or you'll see again and again, what the Willamette Valley looked like in the 1850s, grasslands, oaks, and some ravines, and then like little bits of color. That's all that's left of those historic habitats. So it's been transformed into farmland and into cities. And there's our white-breasted nuthatch there. This is another way of looking at the changes. We could say less than 3% of the habitat of oak remains in the Willamette Valley, or we could say still at least 3% are here. So that's a couple different ways. Lots and lots of changes in that habitat. And then if we look right here at Salem specifically, well, Salem was in the core of the oak savanna habitat in the 1850s. That kind of cream, this color here, oaks everywhere. And so that's what it would have looked like. And then this is some work that Tyler Hallman and Doug Robinson did. This is Tyler's PhD. Based on eBird data today and those remaining oak habitats, they looked at how many birds were there and which birds were there. They did this for all of the different habitats. These are those same ideas, historic habitat of where oak was. This is where grasslands were. This is where nuthatches were. This is where meadowlarks were. Of all the birds in the Willamette Valley, the two that have suffered the most are the western meadowlark and the slender-billed nuthatch. It's 97% decline in habitat and numbers of birds expected over the time. And then slender-billed nuthatch, 93% decline. There's actually a 75% decline of oaks, but a 93% decline of birds estimated. And that's because we think, because they like those big old trees. Now we're going to talk about other things that are threats to nuthatches, and Grace Shimpsey is going to come and talk a little bit about cats. This happened because we started doing nuthatch work this summer, and cats tried to eat baby nuthatches.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Shimke. Thank you for the introduction. I am a senior, a biology major at Willamette University with a huge interest in cats. I currently volunteer at Salem Friends of Feline and Wildcat Ridge, which is a wonderful sanctuary with everything from domestic cats to tigers, and I have plans of interning there this summer. My capstone project specifically is focused on feral cats. Feral or unowned free-roaming cats are among the most successful invasive species due to their rapid reproduction and their mass consumption of wild prey, killing 10 to 30 billion animals each year. The feral cat population is estimated to be anywhere from 60 to 100 million. Adult feral cats have missed the important socialization window as kittens and are likely to have difficulty adjusting to indoor life. They are a vector for infectious zoonotic and feline diseases, putting humans, wildlife, and other cats at risk. Unaltered males are extremely aggressive and loud, especially during mating season, becoming public nuisances and increasing the chances of deadly interactions. I am currently applying for the CAFE's grant at Willamette for funding to trap, neuter, and release, or TNR, the feral cats on Willamette campus, followed by colony management. Other methods usually fail to produce sufficient results, such as trapping and euthanasia. They often leave a few cats that evade capture, which leads to repopulation of the area. When we remove all feral cats at once, the void they leave will eventually get filled by more cats because their initial presence suggests a suitable habitat. Ignoring the cats won't solve the problem either, as they can multiply rapidly under ideal conditions. Texas A&M and the University of Florida both have implemented TNR programs supporting the idea that managed TNR colonies tend to have a stable and substantial decrease in population size in the following years. Following spay and neuter, there was a shift in their diets, becoming more like indoor cats and more reliant on commercial wet food. It also helps them gain weight, improves their overall welfare, and alters undesirable behaviors like spraying and fighting. The first step in tackling the problem, and something that every cat owner can do right now, is keep their pets indoors. While they may be more domesticated, pet cats still and will contribute to spreading diseases, predating wildlife, and are at risk of injury and death while outside. Thank you.
So one of the things Grace and everybody was talking today in a class called Biology 453W, a behavioral ecology. It's a writing center class. And we're taking, this year, everybody had to work for Dave. You had to have your project somehow connect to something I was interested in. And so Grace, again, doesn't really care that much about birds, but they're extremely smart and creative. And so they're bringing cats. And then we have this connection. Many of you know how we manage cats is very complex, very controversial. We don't have the same opinions about that. And that, again, is one of the great things being at Willamette with early career folks. We can have those authentic arguments and figure out what to do. Another way that we are exploring making meaning is through the interconnections of art and science. And so I'm going to have Annabelle come talk about that.
Thank you, David. Hi, I'm Annabelle.
I'm also a senior at Willamette. And just immediately piggybacking up, yes, off of what Grace was talking about with cats, a lot of her data is really important to hear, and it's important that we engage the public with this information. And I feel like art is the perfect way to translate data. This image by Jack Wonderly is a collection of victims of domestic cats that were brought into a local California shelter. I'm not sure of the name, but basically there were over 300 patients that came in, and 232 of them died, and they were all victims of feral or domestic cats. But there were 89 survivors, which is awesome. But I thought that this picture by Jack Wenderly did a really good job of encapsulating that data. This other stuff on the left is my art. Basically, my project is going to be advocating for art in the sciences and why it's so important to blend them. I really do feel that science brings meaning through controlled observation and experimentation through the scientific method. But with the scientific method, we lose emotion and empathy. And I think that emotion and empathy is the #1 way to connect the public to these issues. If they don't see it, they won't believe it. And seeing numbers and stats is often very hard to translate in a way that is like going to make people care. So I want to make art that makes people care and makes people really see the impact of our efforts or lack of efforts. This one piece is a European starling, a juvenile European starling that I found after a window strike, and I really wanted to commemorate its life, and I'm very into printmaking, so I decided to make some prints of its body. I believe that printmaking, especially monoprinting, is a very good way to get accurate attention to detail and bodily proportions, because I am terrible at illustrations. But yeah, I just want to advocate for animals and honor their life through death, similar to how an artist, Christopher Marley, does, who is local to Salem and is now very huge and wonderful. I love his work. I'm very curious in peeking around the OSU Prax Art and Science Initiative. Their whole project is blending art and science in this way that translates data into a visual form that is easier for people to process, or opens up a lens that is untraditional but extremely helpful. And I think that artists deserve a place at the table in the realm of science, and I just am here to advocate for that. So yeah.
Thank you, Annabelle.
And then Anna mentioned window strikes. We're going to have Taya talk about window strikes and more on the science side.
Hi, my name is Taya Fukuhara. I was here last year with Daniel Barnard for Willamette University Bird Nerds. We talked about art club and stuff. And here I have with the numbers and the statistics. So this is a great way to tie in with the art on how to continue integrating and adding that empathy, because you can see this bar graph and you're like, oh, what is that? Well, the M stands for a million. Around 5.9 that, and between 1 billion, yet again, because it was an isolated study. So yeah, students have been doing research around this on our Willamette campus, and we've identified several buildings that contribute to window strike mortality. Being a person that people see as a bird person just in public by the campus, even though we can see there are so many bird people here. I often get texts about dead birds from students, and they're very distraught about it. So having to go about that in a way. You can see a white-breasted nuthatch getting hit. I don't know, have we had any freezer white-breasted nuthatches yet? No? Okay. Well, plenty of cedar boxwings. But yes, so solutions. Right now we are working on putting window strike decorations, decal stickers onto some of the most high impact buildings on Willamette University's campus. With our bistro, we have one building that we painted. Administration doesn't think that looks pretty or professional enough, so we have to go this route. Right now, we just got our first quote, which was between $30,000 and $50,000 for several buildings. So students, we cannot contribute that. But luckily, we have the community action and fund for equity and sustainability to propose for. And we have also become the first nationally affiliated Audubon on campus club in Oregon. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, the first one in Oregon, really awesome. And that means we will be working with you guys more. Yes. Not only are we required to, but we also want to. So hopefully more funding will open up for that as well. And we can also work with you guys on that as well. Through fundraising efforts, and then maybe from donations from you guys, maybe. I don't know. We will work on it. All of this is very new. There you go.
Thank you, Jeff. One of the things I like about working with students is they're like, we have to do this. We have to fix all the windows. And I'm like, great, well, let's figure out how to do that. And then we initially did artwork, and that was good for a while. But there are these tensions about how things look in public spaces. And then let's figure out how to do it totally pro. And Tay asked how much I thought it would cost. And I was like, $7,000, $8,000. It's like, oh no, 30 to 50. And the expense comes in for like as soon as they told the details, the lift to get up to the second, third story windows, and then again the really nice dots that look in. It is a particular thing. How awesome that you could even buy that and pay for that, right? So like 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been a business. And so defining again big ideas by people early in their careers. If you are in Salem, Oregon, hopefully you have met or seen David G. Lewis give talks. He is our local historian, Kalapuya man, also professor at Oregon State University. And this event that Grace is Rose Grimson is the president of Growing Oaks, and we have an oak festival. So this is part of Dave talking about the history of the Willamette Valley through the tree rings, and then back in that time of Quinabi, and how that relates in this idea of Kalapuya land. And then I did stage this picture. I put a lot of peanuts right next to the sign, so the scrub jay was laying on top. So again, just try to center ourselves in this place, in this placekeeping. This is some of the first work thinking about Kalapuya land over at Bush Pasture Park, and there's a sign. It's got that Kalapuya man drawing that's so famous. And then here we are, Indigenous Peoples Day, recently with Rose High Bear and the folks from Wild Elderberry Farm, and then some members of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde, and we're planting camas seeds and underneath one of those big long branches, restoring some of the parts of the ecosystem. Other ways of thinking about this is the month of March, and so that's a European idea. The Kalapuya calendar was one that was about seasonal rounds and how and where you ate things and where you were living. We're in the Tuli or the winter season, and again, there are those 4 seasons of place. And nuthatches are not in this story in terms of the Kalapuya stuff, because they weren't an important food thing. A lot of times people want to know, hey, you know some Chinook Wawa, what's the word for this bird and that bird? Chinook Wawa is the trade language for the many tribes. So if it wasn't a commercial trade object or a spiritual object that people talked about, it doesn't have a name. The Grand Ronde community is making names now in one of their schools, so I'll just throw that out there. And then one of the other things I want to just add to your sense of place, and we're going to talk a little bit about the transformation of the continent, particularly with Oregon is distinctive. We're the only state that has things on 2 sides of its flag. We've got a beaver on it, home of the beavers. This talk was originally at OSU, and the Willamette's seal is a beaver. That's because the Hudson's Bay Company and the thirst for fashionable hats and waterproof clothing in Europe drove an extraordinary set of globalization leading to the commercial extinction of beaver. And this are those routes of where people are going and how things are going back and forth. The oaks. The oaks are here in part in relation to those people because the jays are here. All acorns co-evolve with jays, and then the trade cycle before the removal of beaver. This is thousands of years before the present, and there was a bunch of cycle change, climate change, and David Harrelson talks about this in a really cool, complex story. The last 3,000 years, the world was getting cool, and the only reason we have oak trees so common in the Willamette Valley is because people for 3,000 years are burning, having fires, and keeping those trees open. It would turn into conifer habitat otherwise. The other cool thing about this time is that I mean, not cool, but I should say significant to all of us from Willamette University. That's when Jason Lee, the founder of the university, comes to the Willamette Valley, 1834, 1843, and this is an exhibit from the Oregon Historical Society, their museum. And we talk about the history of the place. I like this, having Lee talk in his own way. He preached to a mixed congregation of English, French, Scotch, Irish, Indians, Americans, half-breeds, Japanese, etc. Some who did not understand 5 words of English. So this is notable because I don't think most of us think about the 1834s as a place of French and Scotch and Japanese folks. They were here as part of this history. And then the poor attitude that Lee has about them not understanding him because he wants to talk in English. That's part of the sad part of the story. One of the things that the Oregon Historical Society has done in a thoughtful way, in collaboration with tribes, is they don't just have the white guy telling the story in that version of history. They partner with another person each time. So here we have Roberta Connor, a Cayuse elder, who talked about it is the first incursions and the beginning of the invasion of the Columbia River Plateau. So they're talking about this same period. It is the advent of dispossession for our tribes. It is the intentional extension of the European form of colonization into the Northwest. It's the fulfillment of a prophecy that our tribal lives would be changed and that we would need to endure great difficulties to survive. And so they saw what was happening and they planned to survive. And so they're still here today. One of the things that we were out at Sonny's Island with me and Barbara doing bird watching out there. We stopped at a great place to watch sandhill cranes. And it is where Fort Williams was, and Fort Williams is where Nathaniel White, the person on the far left, had his first company of American trade. And the wagon that he came to in 1834 included the naturalist Thomas Nuttall, Nuttall's woodpecker, and Nuttall's the dogwood tree, John Kirk Townsend of Townsend's warbler, and Jason Lee. So the founder of Willamette University was in the same wagon as Townsend of Townsend's warbler. Isn't that kind of extraordinary? And that's the moment of history that we need to reckon with. One of the things that Townsend was working for the Philadelphia Academy of Science, was the premier post for science at that time. Another person who was working there at that same time was a man named Samuel Birch Morton. He was the leading scientist of phrenology, or the study of skull shapes, and how in that era they were looking for, like, how can we prove that white people are better than everybody else? And categorically, that's among the most, or perhaps the most racist thing in the history of science in the United States. And it's happening in that same era. And Jason Lee was on a fundraising trip. So they've got Lewis and Clark, they come out, they meet a bunch of folks in the Chinook Nation, and some of the people there, for beauty, all if you are appropriately born, you get to have your head flattened. And so you can see some pictures of people with head flattening there. The person in the middle, to the right, that's Stumanu. He is a Chinook person. And he ended up in the care of Jason Lee at our first Indian Rural Labor School in the 1830s. And for fundraising, Jason Lee took him back to Philadelphia. He was a scientific marvel, a person who had a flattened head, who was really smart, a person who had their head changed. And how could they be Indian and be able to learn 3 languages and function so well? So this is a great history. Morton wanted his skull. He wanted the skulls of those folks. And Townsend, when he came out with Jason Lee and Nettle out at Astoria, there were recently deceased people, and he knowingly stole their skulls. He met and knew that some of their relatives, people in that time, some white folks said, "Don't steal ones from people's graves; those are our friends." And he did it anyway because it was so valuable to science. And then Lee, Stuano, and Jason and Townsend are all back in Philadelphia at a particular time there. So again, complicated history. And I'm a big fan of changing bird names. I love Townsend's warbler, but he's camera. He was an asshole. He had some bad, like, no, while I was here, he's not an asshole. He did some very bad actions, and we hope that we can do better. One thing's flying, and while we're talking about this is, I wouldn't be here if Jason Lee hadn't made an institution. Salem wouldn't be here if Jason Lee and his folks hadn't made an institution. The Oregon Institute building was on our campus. There's a lot of energy right now to find where it was and how it relates to the current building we still have on campus. This is one of the first photos of Willamette Valley. You can see we used to have a totally sustainable lawn. We had wildflowers. Some of the things you can actually see, camas and farm lilies in and around here. And so that'd be cool to make that happen again. This is, we're going to be looking at history. When I was given the talk for the folks in Corvallis for the Willamette Valley Bird Symposium, I realized I didn't know discovered in the European tradition, slender-billed white-breasted nuthatch. And when did that happen? And it's an extraordinary story. A teenager, early prodigy, 15-year-old from Philadelphia, goes and meets Townsend and Nettle, and they're like, this kid is smart. And so at 18, he was sent to Santa Fe and then goes on a wagon ride up to Monterey. And the first slender-billed white-breasted nuthatch is described in Monterey and Monterey Bay, near the mission there, and it was January 31st, 1832. So that same year that the university is found. So people propose January 31st as Nuthatch Day. Gamble is short. He does that when he's 18. He goes and jumps on a ship to Hawaii, describes a bunch of stuff. Gets back home, gets a medical degree, and he comes out to the gold fields and dies of typhus. And let's skip the Oregon history because it's interesting, but not as important. Okay. So let's come back to the nuthatch and the system. The bird has endured through all that time. All this changes the ecosystem. The birds don't choose the people who describe them, but those of us who do stuff now are trying to be thoughtful about this place. And then we get into a little such around the heavy stuff. We'll just do a vocabulary. This is a nuthatch. Is it called a nuthatch because it hatches nuts? No, that's not why. But good fun. And then one of the things that I had come to love about nuthatches is I don't think they're that interesting. Like the brown creeper nuthatch, I thought they're boring. But I don't know. Everybody likes white-breasted nuthatch. Like if they make about birds and they put them on there. Like breasted button. That's a good name for them. Commonly all kinds of sales for magazines, all kinds of products. And this is an article. Taya and a couple of us are working on a future talk on white-breasted nuthatch subspecies. Here is the picture that I told you that it's the wrong subspecies. And now I'm going to show you how and why. You look at this magazine article, it's about cryptic species or species that are hard to detect. And it's a lot of like greater coverts. So how many duck feathers are on their shoulders? The amount of buck is really subtle differences. They are really hard. The experts in Oregon with the conservation plan put the wrong birds on the cover. And so because they weren't as thoughtful as they could be, I feel really bad telling them if they had the wrong bird. But then that's what we're going to do. Again, there are two subspecies: the Rocky Mountain subspecies or the central subspecies. That's Sitta carolinensis tenuispa, and then we have the slender-billed or the Pacific subspecies. Again, we're going to work on a fun talk of how to tell them apart. So that's a way to tell. And then I took the pictures in the reports and I did reverse image search in Google until I could find them. And so I knew that it was the wrong bird, and I found that this was a bird that was photos taken in Shenandoah National Park. So that was confirmation that it was the wrong bird. And then this bird, again, on the back cover, it was taken at a place in Western Georgia. So that was one of those things. So if you have good slender-billed nuthatch pictures, there is great need for them to be spread in the world, and we don't have a lot of good ones. This is one more great thing. Peacekeeping, the big picture, the flyer document, the elevator pitch, get us money to go and change laws and get resources and license plates and stuff. And again, there's those two pictures of nuthatches, the wrong one. And then the other thing, they've got this cute picture of oak trees, holding oak trees. It's also the wrong oak species. It's the English oak. This is my problem. I see these details. I'm like, wait. And then sometimes the details matter. So what happened was people were worried about AI. Well, I'm also worried about sloppiness. People were just like getting a picture, downloading and using it, and then calling it. So that's a thing. We're going to talk a little bit. Some more students for the talks will be interesting again soon. Climate Watch is a program that we've been participating in, and it's the kids. This is again a problem. They just lumped all nuthatches together and said, how are they doing, and made a model. And then there are 7 subspecies. This is the climate futures. This is where we're today. And as we move, we know that nuthatches are going to be expanding and being pushed north. This is the regional trends of nuthatches based on eBird. Lots of nuthatches increasing lots of different places, but our subspecies is questionable about its changes in decline. So go eBird. This is again a thing that we're working on in a complex way. We're taking the best known geographic distributions of different nuthatch subspecies, looking at how when education helps people change their perspectives. 2007 is when the geneticists figured out that the subspecies probably was the first species. And then these dots are just showing that some people started to notice that in eBird. This is a project that was done in California after that paper came out, and people wanted to look at the contact of the 2 subspecies, the Rocky Mountain Central tenuissima or the Pacific aculeata. And so they looked in these areas here in the Sierra range and then did really close recordings, calls, and found that they don't hybridize, that they are very clearly habitat associated. eBird is a special article pushing people, encouraging them to do eBird using the subspecies. And so I'm asking you all to do that too. One of the things that hasn't been done is analysis in Oregon. This is on the left is Portland. On the right is the Dalles. On the river gorge, you can see nuthatches all the way through there. My sister lives in Mosier, and at her house, I hear this subspecies, the Rocky Mountain subspecies, but I don't know how and when that changes. So we're going to work to coordinate a big, huge project on how and when do we count the birds and get to know them. And the Willamette Valley, if we see, this is Salem, if we see percentages, we assume they're this subspecies, the slender-billed, and if we go over to Sisters or Bend, we assume they're the Rocky Mountain. We need to start taking pictures and recordings and confirm that. And then I was talking about the thing that I want to emphasize when I talk about indigenous knowledge. I'm not an indigenous person. I'm lucky to learn and do some homework. I am reconnecting some of my Irish heritage, and this is the current president of Ireland. And when they did their kind of keynote or sort of talking to the country, they talked about this word Tamala. Irish word to describe one half or the Western percentage of land, air, and water, and deep connections to the earth. And one of the things that Ireland lost, they lost all of their oaks. 150 years ago, English came in and colonized, and they took away all the oaks. They did it to break the spirit of the people. A place called Derry, or any place that's called Dare, O'Dare, or that means oak in Gaelic. Today in Ireland, oaks are seen as English trees. These people, in the past, that's where fairies and all kinds of things lived inside those trees. And so these are stories that are deep and take time. Here's a management of the painful past of the British and the Irish people, and the planting oak trees together, again, trying to think about the future. We don't know which is the European nuthatch ever existed in Ireland, but we do know the woodpeckers go extinct. Slender-billed nuthatches are slowly probably going extinct. The good news is they plant oak trees, and some oak trees got old enough the woodpecker came back. More, I love there too, so we'll go by there. I'm not going to say the tree. All bunch of countries love oak trees, and so the tree has a national bird with a nuthatch, but lots of national trees. Those lots of those to love and think about oaks. And one of the oaks too is they have so many things that are dependent on them. There's a group going to celebrate decade over here back at this particular plan, and then lots and lots of people are making plans about birds and oaks and how to do good work, so we don't have to make it up ourselves. Because it's going to talk in a second. Here, I'm going to go down to Klamath Bird Territory and work with them on some work that they're doing related to and nuthatches. And again, this is so sad. Saying they've got this great diagram and they have the wrong nuthatch again. And then they'll come. One of the things that we're asking people to do put birdhouses. We have Temple and Seven and have been awesome collaborators here with birdhouses. And then Dave, tell us about the birdhouse stuff we're doing.
So the project we're currently working on is setting up birdhouses and then monitoring them for white-breasted nuthatch activity on campus. I think we have between about 40 boxes on campus, and we've been monitoring them. One of the things that we're looking for with your boxes is if you have a box or if you want to buy one and put it up in your yard and you have an oak, and then maybe let us come out and check out your box if you have a nuthatch nesting. We've had a few people who have had nuthatches nest in their yard, and we're able to watch and monitor the nuthatches raise their chicks, and then the chicks fledge, and really nice. But yeah, so we're hoping to I guess the purpose of looking at boxes is to kind of assess nest selection, show that their oaks are also relevant to not just as habitat but also as nesting habitat in white-breasted nuthatches, and kind of figure out all of the different habitat aspects or that go into choosing an oak as a nesting site or any other kind of tree. I think this picture on the bottom, I think that might have been Bush Park. There was a white-breasted nuthatch that also nested at Bush Park, so it can be anywhere, like your yard. Just one oak tree, is enough to have a white-breasted nuthatch nest there. It doesn't need to be a whole forest.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to one of the things too we're doing. We're trying to use existing protocols for all of our data and share all of our data. So we're using the Cornell Nest Watch protocol, and then David and other folks at David, we are much more complex. We've talked about nuthatches a little bit in the past, and some of you have shared some nests. This year, we've been monitoring a whole bunch of boxes, doing the importance of zeros. So we're going every week, making sure there's no nuthatches yet. The key data we need for the conservation of white-breasted nuthatches is the first egg date and the last egg date, and then how successful are they breeding. So we're trying to get those. And again, we will, if you have nuthatches in the past at your yard, let us know. Let us know again, and we're working to datafy all of the activity. So,
Hi again. This is what I'm not a senior yet. I will be next year. But my capstone is focusing on is Project Feeder Watch, which you all can be a part of. Raise your hand if you've used eBird. Okay, and then keep your hand up if you know Feeder Watch or have been using Feeder Watch. Awesome. We have people who use Feeder Watch. Yay. Well, the awesome part is that you guys are going to be a part of my capstone. I'm going to be seeing where Feeder Watch observers are. The problem with Project Feeder Watch is that they don't allow us to identify subspecies. So my project will be to hopefully encourage Cornell Lab to add subspecies so we can begin to better understand the slender-billed nuthatches region, because like Nest Watch, Project Feeder Watch has a bit more strict parameters, which can help in data validation. But yes, also I felt reminded with this one. I do think that Willamette window strike prevention is possible, and they also have bird class collision studies. You should also do that.
That's right. So our Feeder Watch this year is that they're looking at collision class, and then one of the things that Taya's project and David's project, if you have, it could be bad pictures, we need to confirm that the birds in our boxes and feeders are in fact the slender-billed, and we can do it with pictures. Here's some cool stuff that happened on the East Coast with white-breasted nuthatch and a hierarchical study of feeders, and the takeaway is white-breasted nuthatches are pretty bossy. They're pretty good. Blue jays kicked them out. Titmouse are a little bit tougher, but junco and chickadee can't stand up against a white-breasted nuthatch. Now, one of the things that is interesting, if you read the books and read the studies on the East Coast, is white-breasted nuthatches do not use boxes. They totally use boxes here. So that again suggests something about our subspecies is being different. One of the things that we're really keen, again, is at the nest sites with all of the big cameras. What are the birds eating? There's something, but there's a lot of important questions about which sunflower seed versus other bird seed that they need, but what they eat at the nest, that's really important. And so, again, these are pictures that we've taken all in and around campus of little bugs. And then again, the photography, we can start to make identifications of here's an earwig, here's a hornet, here's an ant, there's a Ligeia, a tree bug. This is a Bush Pasture Park, and the Climate Watch protocol has, you need to have 10 spots. We chose 10 in and around our campus for an urban area, and then 10 out of our Willamette Xena property or rural property. And that is connecting to a new area of research that Riley's going to share about. Riley is a graduating senior, late to the breakdown, but at least Riley took on a biology to turn into a super bird nerd.
Hi, I'm Riley. So this semester I am doing a project on the use of autonomous recording units for passive acoustic monitoring of the white-breasted nuthatch. So these are stations that I have set up. We're doing it in a urban and then rural area. Originally, this was going to be on campus, trying to determine if the air used can be used to determine species abundance in a given area. And it was going to be done on campus, and then that became kind of a logistical nightmare. And so instead, the community was great and offered up all of their houses and properties and such. And so we're going to have one in a rural area and then one at Dave's house, actually. And then it'll be all the data, it'll go through BirdNet, and it'll single out different calls. So we're going to do spectrogram analysis and look at call differentiation, and then see if it can be used to determine species abundance.
Thank you. Well, we just learned about ARUs like a month ago, and they're like, hey, we have to do this. I'm like, we've had a little bit of a bit. And one of the things we try to do at Willamette is old school love of the birds and their habitat, and then what is the emerging technology? There's not a lot of jobs just to watch birds anymore. You got to watch birds and think about art. You got to be able to watch birds and think about new ways of detecting them and how to go and relate that. You have to think about birds and data sets with hundreds of thousands of trees and how to make meaning out. So we're doing that. This is a part of the thing that we think we know about nuthatches is they like these older successional stages. We have lots to test about that. This is the only diet study that was ever done on white-breasted nuthatches by a grad student in 1976. They went and they shot and killed pygmy nuthatches, red-breasted nuthatches, and white-breasted nuthatches on both sides of the mountain, and they found no difference in pygmy nuthatches or red-breasted nuthatches. Ate the same thing on both sides of the mountain. On the valley side, on the oak side, you can see they had a diet that's one color of rainbow, and then on the pine side, they had different things that they ate. At this point, they didn't distinguish subspecies, but now when we look at that, the backcast, it's like, oh, those are two different species of nuthatch. So that's work that we need to do. We're not going to kill birds. We can do it in different ways now. Abby's going to go and help do an overview of the question of like these oak trees and what are they eating. So Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby Richardson. I'm a senior at Willamette. Yeah, I'm studying oaks. We've been mentioning how important they are. It's estimated that over 200 species rely on oaks, but I want to go further into that and determine the seasonal variability of them, how much they rely on them, like, the slender-billed white-breasted nuthatch, almost completely relies on them, and I want to, study other species and see if they rely on them the same way or if they're able to adapt to other trees and apply it to future management of these habitats. And then I am utilizing iNaturalist and this project that I would love for you guys to join or even just upload your own observations to help me with my research. And here at the Oregon Zoo in Portland, they have their own display of how important oaks are, and this shows 17 species that rely on oaks, and yeah, I don't know.
And then, thank you, Abby. Thanks to that, the hard work. Lots of people talk about how many species use oak trees. 200 is the number that they talk about. That's completely made up. Nobody has actually counted them. It's a guess. They're basing it on guesses. They're basing it on well-documented studies in England and Pennsylvania. Different species of oaks, and so also white oaks, but nobody's done it for the Oregon white oak. So Abby is doing that comprehensive literature review, all of these kinds of soft data resources, and then looking for discovery. For those that have been to the Oregon Zoo recently, go. It's amazing how much they're emphasizing conservation. They have a whole conservation center. Tay and I are wandering around. I'm like, I wish they would have oaks in here. And we come around the corner, and there it is. It was great. They had the oak in the species, and it was the species of nuthatch at the Zoo Conservation Plan. So again, there's the small things, but the big things we can do. Rose, tell us about the trees. Sorry, Grace.
No, it's
Rose. Oh my God.
okay. We've been talking about trees.
I didn't have dinner. I just had cheesecake. So much.
No, it happens, and especially when you're in college. So I have the great task of taking what we have currently identified in Bush's Pasture Park, which is one of the wonderful urban parks in Salem that you all are probably familiar with. A little bit of history on Bush's Pasture Park. It actually used to be a camas camp, and so the Kalapuya used to go in seasonally and collect camas, and so they would harvest camas and also steward it for abundance. And so Bush's Pasture Park actually had a long history of being burned, and we have these gorgeous legacy oak trees, and then we also have sections of the park that are oak woodland, so densely populated with oak trees that are more like asparagus oaks than your big broccoli shape. And what we were seeing here is actually the work of the student collaborative research program in 2022, when they went and identified nearly 1,000 oaks in Bush Park and documented. Sorry, oh my gosh, I'm also having trouble today. Documented them on iNaturalist, which is wonderful, and this is really integral to the Salem data set that we're going to make in conjunction with telemetry and MODIS, which I believe Marcus is going to talk about soon, in that we're going to be able to tag trees, map trees, and then figure out where these nuthatches are nesting, and then what trees they're frequenting, and hopefully we'll land with some data that suggests that these legacy oak trees are super valuable and need to be conserved in numerous ways. Over here, Dave's already talked about this, but Willamette Valley has lost a lot of its oak canopy over the years, and this data is very old. It's from 2013. So part of what I'm going to be doing is update that and kind of have a better idea of what the spatial distribution of oak trees looks like today. So here we're actually looking at Lori Henning's data from Portland Metro. She and a large team has gone and done a ton of data collection on their oaks. There's the connectivity cores that they have established. They've also done some just general oak presence, and then they've also done woodland patches. So different types of data. So there's point data and raster data. But very comprehensive and a model that we're wanting to kind of replicate in our own urban area. And then over here, we've recently learned that the aluminum tags that have traditionally been used on trees get decimated by squirrels in urban areas. And so we've been trying really hard to figure out if brass is going to be the long-term solution for that. And we put up tags over the summer, and we're going to kind of monitor them and see if that's what we're going to, use in conjunction with mapping. And so this is kind of a master plan here and master data set. It's definitely in the works. It's very bare bones right now. We're kind of compiling all of the scraps of data that we have collected previously by the SCRP group in 2022, and then past classes and labs and teachers, and get it into a form where we can start merging it with data maybe from OSU and the city, Portland, and also the city of Salem too, and then other universities such as Western, and then even maybe the wine industry or the local tribes as well. So, and then of course that will help us also with the telemetry once we get MODIS towers and nodes put out across the landscape. So quickly, with what we have collected previously in 2022 as the Student Collaborative Research Program, which we also had happen in 2025, yay, and will continue to happen, we identified nearly, a little bit over 1,000 oak trees in Bushes Pasture Park. And then we also grouped the oak trees into different DBH, or diameter breast height. There's a lot of large diameter old growth trees in Bushes Pasture Park, but then there's also a lot of trees that are below 24 inches or 60 centimeters in Bushes Pasture Park too. So we have quite a diverse grouping of oak trees, which is what will make this a really good study area that we can resample constantly. And I believe it's now on to Jason with his LiDAR.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. We've got two, so we're going to finish the two kind of high-tech futures, and I was really pleased. Jason, who's going to talk, didn't mean any of the rest of the class, but he had skills with LiDAR, so he's going to talk about that and how we're going to use that for oak trees.
Yeah, thank you. As David alluded to, I'm not much of a birder. I've really only been birding for the better part of 8 months, and pretty much all of my knowledge can be attributed to David and my peers. However, something I do know a little bit about is remote sensing. So last summer, after the previous summer's wildfires, I worked with Professor Scott Pike in Greece collecting remote sensing data, in this case, LiDAR in particular. And so a little bit about how LiDAR works and how we can actually use that locally in Salem. I wanted to see how we can model these forests the same way we were modeling post-wildfire landscapes in Greece. And so the way sensing actually works is, in our case in Greece, we were using an aerial-based system where not a plane, but a drone would fly over the landscape, and the LiDAR unit would shoot laser pulses down to the ground, and like light does, the laser would hit a surface on the ground and return to the sensor. And what the LiDAR unit would do is it would measure the time it would take for the laser to leave the sensor and come back. Once the sensor had that data, we were then able to attribute that laser to a single point and create these models which are made of thousands and thousands of points. This image here is attributed to a student, I think it was their master's thesis, Adam Perez Ramiro, who did a very similar study that I'm hoping I can write a paper and model maybe future study off of. I really like this image. This is actually from a different study, but it's basically looking at cross sections of trees. And so once we have these models of the oak woodland, we can take these trees and cut them in half, and we have some detailed models of the actual canopy structures where these birds live, forage, and make nests. This data is not super detailed because it was captured from above using traditional aerial methods for the LiDAR data collection. It's my hope that we can use resources the school has already and actually collect LiDAR data from the ground. This will enable us to have far more detailed models of the tree canopies on a much more finer scale when compared to collecting data from the air. Again, I want to shout out Willamette Valley for their research because I'm very heavily modeling our project on what they collected. As far as what we have planned, I'm hoping to use tools Willamette already has. For example, we happen to have a LiDAR USA Survey 32, which enables us to collect data from both the air and the ground. And then we have access to some pretty advanced software that actually lets us model this data once it's collected. And so you can take this data, put it in a computer, and possibly which way, and look at model these forests from a computer, which saves a lot of time.
Thank you. And that's this is one of the things that smaller in college where we know each other with the way. Jason's roommate was somebody who was working with me already on birds and that person is Marcus. Well, Marcus sort of closes us out with the last new method.
Right. How many of you guys know what MODIS is? Raise your hand if you know what MODIS is. Awesome. So a majority of you guys know this. So it's an antenna. If you guys have been down to Ankeny Wildlife Refuge, you have seen this antenna here on the right many times. And the other day I was actually driving by and we saw a kestrel hanging out on top. I thought that was pretty cool. For this project, as you know, MODIS tracks wildlife movement across the landscape, and so it has been used to track migration. Some important birds that have been done is purple martin. There's also been Swainson's thrush has also been tracked for their migration. So we're going to use MODIS in a little bit of a different way. We're going to also contribute to migration and contribute to the greater community by having a tower here on campus. But we also will be able to track nuthatches and their movement throughout the oak ecosystems. And so, actually, I'm not going to go. So you can see down here in the bottom left, you can see Bush Park and the tower that'll be there. And these are kind of the larger ellipses. So this tower should be able to reach most of Salem, so we can see when these birds come into the oak habitat that's here in Salem. And so it's about being able to track these birds and their movement through the trees and through the different oak habitats. And like my peers and David has talked about, there's been a lot of fragmentation and loss of these oaks. So we can use MODIS in a way to kind of point the antennas towards these oaks, or have something called nodes where they pick up any birds in the radius. Have them in these oak habitats so that we know when the nuthatches are arriving in these areas and how they're using the trees. Here's just some of the work that we've done over the past year, just getting familiar with MODIS and learning all the techniques so that we can build our own project here on campus. These are the kind of sizes of the tags. They're pretty small in hand. So building a project around nuthatches and their tags, and creating a system that works for nuthatches as a sedentary bird opposed to the migratory systems that are already in place. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Marcus. And thank you, Salem Audubon, for in that first MODIS tower and here for one particular on that. I want to just close with another sort of artistic appreciation. This is work by Becca Zemetz, and what I like about this is she chose to paint a female, a slightly more subtle beauty than that black cap of the male. And then she named this Emily, white-breasted nuthatch. And I like to think she named it after Emily Dickinson, who has this favorite quote and poem that we have, "Hope is a thing with feathers." So we'll thanks to the artists and thanks to the people who have hope. Again, there's lots of work to be done, and there's a large decade of work ahead. This is where I end all of the talks that ever since I started dealing with oaks. One of the things that we're looking for different points of view, and Maya Angelou's got so many contributions to American culture, and this is a quote that feels really vibrant and important to today. I can see in the acorn oak tree, I see the growth, the rebuilding, the restoring. I see that is the American psyche. There is so much we can draw our understanding from. one of the lessons is the development of courage. Because without courage, you can't practice any of the other virtues consistently. Here's that beautiful oak tree that inspired me in my neighborhood that is gone. I didn't know it was going to be killed a year and a half later. But I had a sense of like acorn and the promise. And I think you all can agree that Willamette students, let's have a round of applause for them. They're more than acorns. And can definitely see the promise in the future there. So thanks so much. And Jason's got to leave pretty quick. Before we do questions, if you guys would let us do a group picture of nerding out here, that would be great. Say, glad people come. Okay, let's go. Clapping, yay! Let's do. We'll do this one with the two from my campus. Okay, and then. Tim, can you be the photographer? Okay. Excellent. Oh, let's go stand by the tree. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Okay.
Excellent. Okay.
Smile on the tree. 1, 2, 3. One more time.
Excellent.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Great.
Want to take a question? Yeah, let's questions. Yeah.
I think this is working. Anybody have a question? John.
Yeah.
Here. So the Zoom audience can hear you.
A couple of years ago, maybe 2, 3 years ago, there was something in the paper about that you were working. I'm assuming it was you that were collecting specimens of oak trees.
Yes.
Not just oak trees, but old trees, and then doing the work on them to tell their age and the weather, all that related stuff. I turned one of those in. It was an oak from Bush Park, and it was my count was 250 years.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what happened to it.
Great question. So for those who contributed to the Oak Salvage Project.
So for those who contributed to the Oak Salvage Project, Joe Persocks, Karen Erbis, and myself were the faculty, and then some past students. And so we have a database of those. We've got them scanned, counted. The thing that we're doing now, and that Joe and his students have been working on, is scanning each one of the tree rings so we can measure the distance between tree rings and do specific measures of climate for those trees, and then matching all of those trees together. So your tree could have been one of those in that diagram that I showed, Kalapuya man, and some of the trees that go back into the 1700s. And if I could go and find out exactly how old your tree and where it is. We're another thing at Willamette University, the faculty, we all care about first our students, but we all care about these big problems. We're not a research university, and so it takes us longer to get the papers finished, but we're close to having that. The best database for Oregon white oak. One of the things we've learned that's interesting, it's going to make management hard. You can't tell how old an oak is based on how big it is. Ones are generally older than smaller ones, but you can have ones that are the size of my hand that are 250 years old. They'll be growing on a gravelly area with really heavy drainage. You can have ones that are from Willamette Valley that are 150 years old and they're growing on a wet spot. What we have learned though is if you take the neighbors, one falls down in that neighborhood, that area, that habitat, you can make really good references for the rest of the trees. So this is where the spatial work that Rose is doing with where are the oak trees specifically and how does that relate, then we can go and make really good measurements and inferences there. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah. Presidente. Yeah. Okay, can we take this one?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thanks again. Regarding the Oregon white oaks, I'm wondering if there's any contamination, genetic contamination of the Oregon white oaks currently in the Willamette Valley. Have there been other white oaks that have been introduced as ornamentals and maybe have contaminated the stock?
Great question. So, as you might know, oaks are wind pollinated. I think again it's kind of funny. Oaks have flowers. Oaks have flowers. Those funny little dangly things with their flowers. They're wind pollinated. So it's open pollinated. So when we bring in English oaks and bur oaks from the East Coast, oaks are notorious for swarming. They hybridize a lot when they're together, and then their offspring then could be hybrids. And then depending on your values, you could call that contamination. For other people might be like, well, that's potentially where the next climate future trees are going to be. So that's a really good question. There are lots of, depending on the space, there are folks who are looking at the genetic structure of white oaks, and there's a little bit in general where they show the pattern of recent colonization. So the wild was totally covered in water, Lake Allison, 10,000 years ago, and then that retreated. Side note: the Kalapuya people have stories about that, so they've been here for more than 10,000, probably 20,000 years. They saw the flood; they talk about it. And then the jails brought the acorns after those floods, and so we just have the Oregon white oak here. Down, you get the black oak. You go down to the Central Valley, you get blue oak and a bunch of other oaks. So climate change is bringing oaks north, and the genetics are changing. I'm less worried about contamination than I am about the loss of the big old trees. Oregon white oak is not an endangered species. No problem with Oregon white oaks. There's lots of them, but the big complicated places that those trees that show that structure that are more than 200 years old, those are really rare and uncommon. Yeah, so I'm more worried about that.
Question?
The question's coming from Ray Temple. I want Ray to say, have I bought more of your houses than any other person?
Thank you. So, David, you've talked about a number of places here where folks in the audience could engage with you if they have nuthatches on the property, they have photos of nuthatches, they know something about nuthatches locally.
Yeah.
What's the logistics of that? How do they actually engage with you?
Great question. As you know, Ray and Stephanie, so Ray and Stephanie are extraordinary. For those of you who know them, we know they're extraordinary. So I have let them come to class every other Thursday. And they have been contributing. They have already done so much work on that property and then helped us with our campus with a lot of native plant stuff. And so this is a year where I'm trying to figure out how to work with people wherever they are if they have data. So this is not even a project where we're talking a little bit about birds all the time. It's just going to be about nuthatches and oak trees. And so get in touch with us if you're interested in bird boxes and birdhouses. We've got Nest Watch, and we've got David Criag and a bunch of people working on that. If you're interested in feeders and feeder cams and stuff like that, Taylor's helping with some leadership. We're all going to be gone in half, and we're going to the rest of our lives. I'll still be here, and we'll be working towards getting data. So main thing. Check in and let us know what you want to do. I'm definitely going to have some later adult classes on identification of different nuthatches. We're going to have some workshops on how you could participate. We're working on the protocols right now. How to do that? We'll apply for grants where we can give people boxes, and when we start to tag birds, we're going to have ways to go and include people. But we're just tuning up our protocols this year. Yeah.
I just have a comment, David, that gives testimony, I think, to the adaptability of the white-breasted nuthatch. I bird Minto Brown Park a lot.
Yeah.
There are no white oaks in Minto Brown Park. There are a lot of white-breasted nuthatches. They seem to cater to cottonwoods. I lived in South Salem, where also there was no oaks. There was largeleaf maple, there was some Doug firs, and there was some coastal lodgepole pines. I had a fairly sustainable population of white-breasted nuthatches there throughout the year. I did recently in the fall, I moved to the Morningside neighborhood to Ewald, where there are none of those trees. There are these weird Asian maples, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And guess what I found? I found white-breasted nuthatches in those maples.
And so nuthatches, white-breasted nuthatches. Karen looked up Sparkman, who lives here in Salem, and I was professor in 2002-3, and they were doing their masters, did a lot of stuff, and nuthatches. I'm like, no, boring. They're in the parking lot at school. Who cares? I'm crazy hours and again, that student found that whereas evolutionarily they were significant in this area, then it was like, oh no, I'm like 15 years behind. I should have said yes, because they definitely have this association in the same way that this experts got it wrong on the picture sometimes. We really don't know, like nesting in really weird places, like at dad and mom's house, the neighbors have toys, a bunch of stuff, not really habitat, or doing the habitat, and then that's just nested in the little kids' bird box at a pile next to the dogs. It's like, why did they do that? It's like they should be in the raised box at my dad's house. But again, so we're very flexible, and I say it's clear that there's some association. So the question is going to be, for sure, cottonwoods and then ash trees are also important that they use habitat. Those are relatively low, again, of those sizes. Figuring out how many trees do they need, which kind, how important are the oaks. The good thing is probably they definitely don't just need oaks, but at the nest, then how successful are those? Are they breeding? Are they flourishing? The hypothesis is going to be those neighborhoods that don't have the diversity of food of the oaks might be ecological traps. So the birds are able to live there and do stuff, but they never successful raising chicks. It'd be great if we find out slender-bills are their own species and there's not a conservation problem. That's not the hypothesis right now, but we didn't have data. So again, that's where that's really, really great. Just was out with Ray and Stephanie's those 2 weeks ago, and we're figuring out all over the places nuthatches have nested, and Ray made me really sad when he said, see what French row, Richard brush, and the oaks are following, like they nested in the middle of a pasture. And it's like, they're not supposed to do that. That's not what the book said. And again, that's where the direct observation is so powerful. And that's where the technology too, I'll say, is important. A whole bunch of these things are going to be invisible. We're not going to be able to see. So the MODIS tags related to the movement, related to the LiDAR data, related to all the different things are going to be important. So it could be I think a lot of the Asian trees, Zakoba, has lichen and things on it, but they have very few insects on them. And then compared to the Oregon white oaks.
My question is, perhaps the most important thing is a dead tree where another bird can make a hole.
Yeah.
And so that could be why they're getting along here and there and everywhere. As long as they have the bugs to feed their kids, they need holes in dead trees.
Yeah, definitely dead trees. And that's a thing, a cultural thing. We do have some nice dying cherry trees in our parking lot of Willamette that the birds use. And they use them a lot. So again, we're figuring out how and what they need. So excellent.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Have something?
The question is, if Marh and the beautiful AI from Cornell that identifies the birds, recognizes slender-billed white-breasted nuthatch as a white-breasted nuthatch. And so it is the case that they trained the data, so they included them all across the country, and so it categorizes that. It is definitely possible that if we talk to the engineers at Cornell and say, could you add a slender-billed category and do those, then it should be detectable. And the automated coding units that Ryder was talking about, that's a place where we could go and do some testing there and develop that. So the answer is yes. The thing is so fun and also complicated with doing new projects at a place like Willamette. So Ryder applied for a grant. The Cafes is a grant program internal to students. They pay a fee. They create their own grant organization. They review grants, students, by students, for students, and doing big projects. Ryder's project went through the review process. You always have to check facilities, grounds and campus safety. And so we had a policy that you can have no recording units on campus, no audio recording units. And that is related to the couple different things. One is if somebody says on a phone call, "Hey, pay for this," and you say yes, you're legally bound. And so that kind of recording type thing of what you say can be used in courts sometimes. Also, in the current climate, people are worried about different ways in which they're being monitored and traced. And so we couldn't put the Riley's grant was like, we like that, but you can't do it on campus because it's a recording unit. It wasn't intended for wildlife. And so I had a 2-hour meeting with campus safety, working through the process, trying to get that approved. And short term, we're just going to go and put it in my yard. But interesting, complicated details. Yeah. Hey, you over here. Anything else?
Well, Vicky was asking the question about sound, the voice, the on Merlin.
Yeah.
But I can remember being in Sierra Vista, and I could not recognize the white-breasted nuthatch.
In terms of the Merlin.
No, I didn't have Merlin.
Oh, yeah, right.
I just knew it was different and what, and oh yeah, I guess I better take a look.
Yeah.
I wasn't going by sound at all. I couldn't
Yeah.
go by sound.
This is the thing that when younger folks who can't appreciate how hard it was to learn how to do bird watching and do all that kind of stuff. My very first birding by ear, I again grew up extraordinary family, great supportive parents. I was going to have my first internship at Point Reyes Bird Observatory, and they again, I didn't know. My mother loves libraries, and so Mom went to interlibrary alone and got all these magazine articles about white ground sparrows and ridges, where they were scientific journals. We didn't know that at the time. And so I read all these things, and then I got a tape of white ground sparrows because I wanted to impress my when I went to go to work. And then the birds were singing right in front of me, and they didn't match the tape. And it was one of those things that didn't know about dialects. And then I was so stressed. This is for the students. I was so stressed. These people were measuring me, and so I just made it up. And I said, and they're like, hey, and again, it was a very macho culture at that time. And they're like, what's? And I'm like, white crowned sparrow, but it sounds a little funny. And then they're like, it's great. Yeah, we have this whole subspecies that worked in the, and I didn't know that. I was just like, yeah. So that point of here's the thing, there's so much variation in songs that we don't know about. And again, Hazel Carr, her work on brown creepers, there's a lot of sexism in research. So there's been an overrepresentation of studying male bird songs, and everybody thought female bird songs don't matter, or they don't happen, or they're just like after effects. There's an extraordinary generation of women in their 40s. Many are sort of like they're like, forget that, we're going to go and study them, and they found lots of female birds sing in North America, and it's evolutionarily important. And so that's a change. And so we don't. So lots of different ways to think about songs.
Different subspecies. So more than, you got the slender-billed, you got the one in Pennsylvania, and you got one down there.
There are 7 subspecies.
Okay.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. And there are probably 3 big evolutionary clades, and they'll probably turn into 3 species, 2 or 3 species. Yeah. Good. I was misnaming students earlier, and my blood sugar is like all over the place. I'm going to stop now. The cheesecake, thank you to the cheesecake. Now it's all gone. And thanks. So again, thank you so much, Audubon audience, and round of applause. Students, let's all clap for that. Thank you. Wow. Great.